11 and 15.
Good morning, everyone. Just a quick announcement to all of you that were planning on getting food from the food trucks. Unfortunately, due to some paperwork red tape, they will not be able to be here. There are many other alternative food options around though, so feel free to take a look at the program guide. There are alternatives listed on there. There are a lot of restaurants in walking distance, so check it out. Apologies on behalf of BSides staff. We didn't expect things to happen with the storm and all of that. Stuff happens. But if you do have any recommendations or concerns, please share them with each other. Otherwise, here's David Probinski, and good luck.
Yeah. All right, so how's everybody today doing? All right, is this your first time at a BSides event?
Yeah.
Is this your first time at a security conference?
Yeah.
Totally. All right, so today we're going to be talking about physical security. Before we proceed, I do have a short disclaimer that everything that you will be seeing today is for educational purposes only. I do not expect you to go breaking into places illegally. And if you do, me and BSides will not be held liable because shit happens. So who am I? My name is David Probinski, as you already seen. I'm the red team lead. I run the offensive security department for a company called Elevate Consult down in Miami. We're located in Miami, in the New York West Coast as well. We're all over the States. I have 7 years, a little bit shy. I have more than 7 years in experience of mixed IT as well as security, cybersecurity. I'm currently pursuing my bachelor's degree. I have a couple of certificates. I'm an active member of Hack Miami in South Florida. I am a member of InfraGard, South Florida ISSA, and a couple of other organizations as well. And with the cheering, please, please for now. And something I am proud of, me and the Hack Miami group, we won the DEF CON Red Alert ICS TTF. I'm going to brag about it for the rest of the year. So enough about me. Let's move on into what we are here to see today, which is physical security. So the topics that we're going to be going over today is going to be an overview of red teaming, the difference between red teaming and PenTesting. We're going to touch the reconnaissance parts of red teaming, which is really important, the physical security aspect of it. And as well, we're going to see social engineering and how it is involved in the red teaming, because as many of you may or may not know, social engineering is not just sending a phishing email. There's more to it than just a phishing email. So moving on into red teaming. Anybody here familiar with the OSI model? Okay, so here we can see the OSI model. We have the application layer, presentation layer, session layer, and so forth. So when red teaming or pen testing, most of the time we attack most of the layers except the physical layer. When we think of the physical layer, we think devices such as routers, switches, hubs, access points. But it's rare the scenario on why we do not attack these. The reason why, I mean, a lot of companies don't even consider the fact that you can actually attack these, but it is very possible. Sometimes when you actually bring it up in order to attack them, sometimes they'll say, oh, they don't have enough budgets, or they don't consider it to be vulnerable. They'll say, oh yeah, all of our assets are in the cloud, that the offices are empty, nobody's there. Yeah, you can still be popped. We've never had a break-in that you know of. But it happens. I mean, if you think about it this way, if you have a target, let's take it a little bit further. You have a scenario of a big enterprise that you want to breach, you want to attack, and it turns out that they're completely air gapped. How do you get in? If they have no public IP, nothing visible on the outside, how do you get in? Does it happen? Oh yeah. I mean, we don't have to go too far. It was Stuxnet. They were air gapped and they got popped. So it is very possible and it does happen. And in my opinion, the reason why we don't see it that often is because in physical security, you don't have that many evidence. You don't have logs. For example, when you're hacking into a system, you always connect to it. There's running an exploit. And it doesn't matter how good you are at covering your tracks, there's still going to be traces that something was popped. In physical security, chances are it's going to be very difficult, especially now with COVID, everybody wearing a mask. Like if you break into a facility, chances are maybe the cameras saw you, but if you're already in, just take the camera hard drive with you. I mean, how are they going to find you? So this is a diagram that I made a couple of weeks ago. I know it will trigger a lot of professional red teamers that have been in the industry for way longer than I am. As they are part of red teams, but they are not full red team operators. And here's the reason why. Most of the pen testing or red teaming in the aspect of offensive security is done completely remotely. So when you shut off that remote components, as in doing anything from behind a computer, how do you attack them? Like for example, we see we can perform OSINT, we can perform web application hacking, email phishing, anything that we can see from an external standpoint, we're able to attack as a pen tester or as a member of a red team if you do attacks remotely. But if your target has nothing visible online, then what's your next approach? That's where social engineering and physical security come in. Those are the elements that you have to use in order to be able to compromise your target. So, for example, if you're doing reconnaissance on your clients and they have multiple facilities and they have access controls, yeah, you can hack the RFID on it, but in order for you to be able to do that, it requires the physical presence. So someone actually has to go out there to be able to do it. That's not something that you can do remotely. So that's the differences between pen testing and red teaming. There are a lot of pen testers that claim that they're red team operators, but here's the thing. If you have a group of 10, 15, 20 most badasses hackers or red teamers, if you may, and the target is air gaps, how do you get in? That's it. The red team can't do anything. No, we're actually going to move beyond that. So in red teaming versus pen testing, usually you get a scope and rules of engagement. They'll say, okay, you can attack this, you can attack that. But in a full red team operation and full red team engagement, you don't have a set of rules. It's a free for all. Like you'll have clients that, for example, you might not be able to access their they have no database, for example, publicly accessible. However, they have a wireless mesh network that anything is visible. So you have to just hop on their Wi-Fi and from there you're in. You get a foothold. All you need is pretty much connect to the Wi-Fi. You know? So yeah, in my opinion, when red teaming, it's pretty much a free-for-all. Like you're supposed to go at it, no strings attached. Oh, there's something you can't touch. I mean, a real attacker, they don't think about that. There's no way you're going to tell a real malicious attacker, oh yeah, you can't hack this, you can't hack that. No, they'll go for whatever the case. So moving on to reconnaissance. Reconnaissance is one of the biggest elements of red teaming that we have to put our focus on whenever we're trying to infiltrate into a facility. The more reconnaissance that we do into our target, is going to be completely better for us. The more information we have, it's more better for us. So, for example, when we're doing OSINT on pen test, we usually go to our friend Google. We search for DNS records, we search for websites, we search for subdirectories, we search for backend source code. So we look for all these kind of information when we're trying to do a pen test. Well, when we're renting into a physical facility, we do the same process. We gather as much information as we can as possible. Google is your friend. So for example, you can look at the entity name, the name of the business that you're trying to break into. Do they have any known affiliated entities related to them? Do they have offices or facilities in other locations? For example, if you have a big Target and they have offices all over the place and their hub is in the middle of downtown New York, but turns out they have a small branch in the middle of Arkansas. Which one you think are you going to attack easier? Let's go to Arkansas, man, because in New York, you're going to get caught. I mean, there's eyes everywhere. But in the middle of Arkansas, no, let's go there. You know? When you're searching online for the infrastructure of the location, you want to check Google Maps Street View so you can have an idea of what the location looks like. Check to see some places you can actually find the blueprints of the construction site or of the place that you're trying to get into. Check real estate offices, as well as try to check property management. True story. One time we were trying to infiltrate into a location and we searched up a real estate company. It was a building with a shared office space. And turns out that the real estate office had a 3D virtual tour of the location. So we already had an idea of all the location inside where the cameras, sensors, and everything was inside. So yeah, that kind of information you always want to look up online. Social media events, that's a good one as well. There's a lot of companies that they use social media to promote their business, to promote the employee lifestyle, and they're always doing parties and whatnot. From there, you can actually gather information such as their uniform to see if they're using logos, to see if they're using badges. Check the pictures if you can spot in the corner of the pictures, like if you see cameras, sensors, what the facility looks like. Check if you see security guards in the pictures. So that kind of information is when you want to look for in those pictures. Another one is as well, company vehicles. Check if the company has their logo branded on the vehicle. Sometimes they'll have places that if you slap on a copy of the logo on your car, you can probably drive in and they might not think you, they'll probably just think you're just an employee. So that's with OSINT. So another area that involves regarding intelligence and gathering information for engagement is HUMINT, which is human intelligence. So this is trying to compile information from the employees, unknowing employees, as much as you can. Like for example, if they have local coffee shops or they have parks, if you see that they go on their lunch break, try to hang out with them, you know, be friends with a couple of them. I mean, it's a dick move if you're trying to break into a facility, but at least you'll gather valuable information. Because it is very often that a lot of employees, they don't like where they work, so they're always complaining about stuff. So through that complaining, you can actually hear information from that company that you're trying to break into. Human resources, this is a big one. Are they hiring? You can scour through LinkedIn and you'll see a bunch of positions and all their requirements. So we'll see a little bit more of this further along in social engineering. Another thing that you want to take a look into is the foot traffic of the location where you're trying to break into. What does it look like during the day? What's the casual attire? You want to try to blend in as much as you can. You don't want to be wearing something that might pop out. You know, for example, if they're wearing dresses, suit and ties and whatnot, you want to go like full camo and cargo pants because they're going to be sore thumb, you know. You want to keep an eye out for the security guards. Check if they're sitting 24/7 on a desk. Check if they actually do rounds. When you're gathering intelligence, you also want to take note if they do rounds, at what time they do rounds, if they're constant with those rounds, or if they're just sporadic. You also want to check the differences of foot traffic on the day, during at night. For example, if it's during the day and there's a lot of foot traffic, social engineering might be easier to sneak in. If it's at night, if there's nobody there, then you just go physically at night and you'll be able to get in. Check as well, at night, usually you'll see maintenance, you'll see cleaning crew. During the day, you'll see the delivery guys, third-party suppliers. You'll see a lot of people going in and out of the building, depending on where you're going into. So IMINT is image intelligence. And from this one, we want to try to look at image as much as we can in the sense of what can we gather from an image. So for example, by taking a lot of pictures of the location, you can gather what kind of locks they're using. You can check the areas where they have the security cameras, if they have sensors, what the uniforms look like. If you do reconnaissance, for example, with a drone, you can actually fly to the location and get an idea of the overall location. Check for fire exits, that's a big one. Check for any entry or exit point in the facilities, because that's going to help you along the way. You want to take a lot of pictures to check also if they have RFID access controls. Check for roof access, and pictures is one of the biggest key here. Ideally, when you're taking pictures, I wouldn't recommend using a phone. The phone camera you can use when you're actually on site already trying to get into the facility. But if you're doing reconnaissance, you definitely do not want to use the camera of the phone because it's just not powerful enough. To give you an idea, here is a sample of a digital zoom on 10x. So you have the optical zoom, which is done with a camera with a physical lens. Normally, a DSLR cameras, you can actually get those kind of lenses. And the image quality regarding the zoom is way better than the one from the phone, even if you have the latest iPhone. I can guarantee the DSLR can get further with a much higher quality. Because here's the thing, when you're doing reconnaissance and taking pictures for your intel gathering of a building, you do not want to get caught. So ideally, you want to be at least a quarter of a mile or half a mile away. And in order to achieve this, you're going to need at least 40x zoom. So regarding the quality of the camera, there's a sample of the DSLR cameras. They can be quite pricey, but after my talk, you can approach me. I have a couple of suggestions on which cameras you can get for the cheaper price. This book, I'm not promoting or anything, but it's a great book to learn more about photography and covert imagery when you're trying to perform reconnaissance, and you do not want to get caught. Another tip for when taking pictures, there are lenses you can attach to DSLR cameras, which are polarized lens. That sometimes, for example, you're taking a picture at the windows on the side windows of a building, and because of the reflection of the sun, you can't see anything behind it. But if you use a polarized lens, it'll actually cut through it as if there's no reflection whatsoever, and you can see anything behind that glass. So moving on to more interesting part. So let's go on to physical security. So let's take 3 examples of physical security. These are 3 sample targets. Let's say you have a medical, the industrial control place, and the law firms. So why is it important in the aspect of physical security for these locations? So in the medical facility, if you go to a hospital, for example, in a hospital, they have a very, very, very high foot traffic. Wherever you go, you always see people walking up and down all over the place. So they have really low physical security. It's way easy to get in and social engineer your way in. This is bad. In contrast to that, you have the industrial control places. It is very likely that you've driven around and you see, for example, telecommunication hubs, you see electrical hubs, you see water treatment facility hubs, and very likely there's nobody there. Maybe you'll spot a security camera, maybe not. Maybe you'll see a gate with a simple master lock in front. And yeah, the kind of security that you see in usually these places is horrible. And people ask me, like, do attacks in places like this happen? Yeah, they do all the time. The thing is that the news, they don't consider it something relevant. It doesn't really show up. Here's on the bottom, there's a link for a YouTube video on an attack on the electric grid that happened in California. And this was a group of guys with a couple of assault rifles, and they were shooting at electric grid plants for over 20 minutes before someone even reached out to go to the location. So they almost took it down. So yeah, these attacks do happen. And another big one is law firms. The reason why I consider law firms that they're vulnerable is because they store a lot of documents, paperwork on site. Usually they have a lot of flood traffic as well. And the security is not really top notch. And then here's the thing with physical security, why I consider that it's not as known or it's underestimated is that, for example, let's say you have your own office, and of your office, you're the only one that has a key, right? And you've been working on a research paper for the last 2 weeks, a very important document, and you leave the document in your desk because it's a Friday afternoon and you want to go party because it's going to be a long weekend. Great. So you arrived at your office on Tuesday morning, slightly a little bit hungover, got a couple of coffees, and you can't see the research paper. Like, okay, I probably misplaced it. It'll never occur to you that someone got into your office, took the papers, and locked the door on their way out. You just gonna think it's misplaced because you didn't see any break-in. You didn't see anything broken, like no windows nor locks broken. So you just assume you misplaced it. Oh yeah, I probably left that at the house. And turns out because since you didn't consider that it was actually stolen, you think it was misplaced, you never report it. So it goes completely unnoticed. So this kind of thing, in my opinion, does happen. The thing is that people don't really realize what just happened because they think that they're completely secure. I mean, it's amazing the amount of security that people put on to the simple locks at their house. I mean, you have a simple $20 lock from Home Depot protecting your whole family and all your valuables in your house. Yeah, no, that's not good. So tools, there's a lot of them. I mean, yeah, this is just one part of it. I actually have a GitHub with most of the tools that I use. Starting off with here, you can see a couple of important ones going from top to bottom. The power bank, you always need a power bank to power on your devices. You need the shims. I do recommend if you never shimmed a door before, please do pass by the lockpicking village. We'll teach you how to shim a door. You have the bump keys, the thumb turn tool. That's usually used for commercial doors where they have the thumb lock. Yes. A flashlight in case you're actually breaking into a location at night and they have all the lights off. You don't want to catch the attention of pedestrians on the outside or a security guard. You want to be as discreet as possible. Whenever you're doing an engagement and you're doing Wi-Fi as well, you want to bring your Wi-Fi pineapple. That way you can actually drop it off on site and pick it up a day or two later so you can do remote reconnaissance of a wireless network. You want to use RFID frequency detectors. That way you can actually detect what kind of frequency they're using in order for you to configure your Proxmark to be able to clone badges whenever you're doing social engineering. Lockpicks that's by far one of the top priority tools that you're gonna have with you in your tool set. If you've never picked a lock, you can pass by Lockpick Village. We'll teach you how to. Jigglers, jigglers can be used to jiggle your way into a lock and open it. You don't necessarily have to pick it. It depends on the manufacturer of the lock itself, if it's a difficult lock or not. And then you have additional stuff. For example, you have the elevator keys. Everybody here, I assume, knows Deviant. He has a great talk on elevator hacking. Of course, you always want to take your USB implants. It could be your rubber ducky. It could be your key loggers. Always carry your implants with you because what's the purpose of breaking in if you're not going to leave your implants devices in order to you to get on the network. A radio is an important one because you do have to have communication with your team. It is advisable that you never go on an engagement alone, because it does happen that, for example, in some places that you actually break into, you might be able to get in, but it turns out that there's someone that spotted you. So you need an additional set of eyes to actually let you know, hey, I believe someone spotted you, get out of there. Because if not, you can't get caught. And then you'll have additional tools for example, the under the door tool that will set the lockpick village. There's the leashy tools, can of compressed air that's used to bypass the request to exit sensor, and a few others. So in terms of the amount of tools, I've seen videos of people that actually do a video of all the tools that they use on a red team engagement. And those can be quite overwhelming and depending on the amount of tools that they use. But to be honest, in a real engagement, you're not going to need like a Pelican case full of tools. Like all you need literally is a small backpack like this one. Like here, I literally have all my tools that I use on a red team engagement. Like you don't need that many. And then the kind of bag that you want to use, depending on where you're trying to break in, you want to try to blend in with the environment. You don't want to go with something with too bright colors or a camouflage, something that could catch attention. You want something discreet as possible that would match your attire. So some other items that go overlooked that nobody really talked about when doing a red team engagement, obviously you want to carry with you the authorization form. Always, never forget that. You do want to have the direct number of the contact of the person who actually hired you to do the engagement. Because in case something happens, you get caught by local authorities, you want to be able to call that person and they can approve that you were hired to do what you claim that you're doing. Excuse me. Cameras. So besides the DSLR camera, that's when you're doing the external reconnaissance of the facility when you're trying to get caught. But when you're actually breaking into the place, you actually want to use body cameras and record as much as you can. That way it starts for you when you're creating your report for your client, it shows as proof and to actually show the client how you got in. Another reason why you want a camera with you, in this case, now I do recommend using your phone, is that, for example, you break into a location, into an office. The first thing that you want to do immediately you break in is take pictures of everything, exactly as it is. Then you do your reconnaissance inside, see what you can gather, what intel, what documents, all the juicy stuff that you can find inside of the office. And once you gather all your proof that you need, then look back at the pictures that you actually took and leave everything completely untouched. That way, when you leave and you lock behind you, nobody will notice that you're actually there. Another stuff that you want to carry with you as well is water and candy or sweets or snacks. Trust me, the night can be long and you will get hungry. Careful with those and leaving any traces behind, so always carry the garbage with you. Band-aids and alcohol, that's sometimes when you're picking a difficult block, sometimes you can easily go over an hour and you might cut yourself while trying to use a pick if they're in. You do want some form of ID, as in your real ID, just in case you do get caught with law enforcement. You do not lie to law enforcement, you do tell the truth. The cell phone with emergency contacts, of course, and TV, because you never know if you're breaking into a remote location and it turns out there's no bathroom and you have an urgent need. And yeah, you're gonna need that. So moving on to social engineering. So social engineering is not just sending a phishing email. A lot of people think it's just phishing an email, but it's way more to that. When social engineering, you really don't need that many tools. However, I mean, besides the props, there isn't no technical tools. You don't really need a laptop. You don't really need any other tools except the props. But you do need a sharp memory. For example, when you're social engineering into a place, you want to remember people's names, what they look like, what they're wearing. When you walk into facilities. So remember a while ago, I mentioned on human resources, if they're hiring, that's a great way of actually getting into a building and have a tour of their facility. Because you can, for example, you would create a fake profile on LinkedIn, create an alias and fill in other requirements that they're actually looking for that position that they're hiring. So you're like, okay, check. I can fill in for this position, and you actually go in for an interview. Even though if at the end of the day, you'll just decline their interview, that you just don't want to apply for the job at the end of the day, but at least you got a tour of the facility with human resources. Well, in that case, you can actually use that information to spot where they have cameras, where they have sensors, what kind of locks they're using, what the uniforms look like, what the badges look like. So one trick that I use to practice memory is that, for example, whenever you're out at a restaurant, let's say you go into your local Chipotle, from the crowd that's actually sitting there eating, try to pick 2, 3, maybe 5 people, right? Take a quick glance at them and see what they're wearing. Wait about 2 minutes and then see if you can replay in your mind exactly what you saw. Kind of like a memory game. And then if you spot on, then increase the time and increase the amount of people. It's like, okay, I remember that person. She was wearing a blue jacket. I remember that guy. He was wearing a suit. So yeah, you want to do that to practice your memory. Another thing that you got to do when social engineering is you have to have a keen eye for details. So once you start getting involved in the physical security world, you inevitably get into the habit of looking at security things. Like I immediately walk into a location, I'm looking at every single door, every single location. I'll look at the cameras. I'll see what they have in terms of physical security. So you're always looking at that and subconsciously. It's just, it happens on your mind. Whenever you walk into a place, you're immediately looking around. Also in social engineering, you have to have a solid pretext as well as a backup pretext. You also need to be able to read body language. For example, if you're trying to social engineer your way in and you're talking to someone in a lobby area, depending on their body language, you can actually detect if they really want to talk to you or if they're just trying to make up excuses to leave you and not continue the conversation. So for the pretext and the backup pretext, let's say a sample scenario, you're trying to break in and you're social engineering your way into a facility, claiming that you're the AT&T guy, and you need to do some checks on the router because you're doing a repair on your neighbor's Wi-Fi and you don't want to bring anything down. When I say that you need a backup pretext, is that you want to be have a backup, as in someone else part of your team that you can able to provide information on in case they want to validate that information they're actually claiming. For example, if you walk in and you say who you say you are, that you're an AT&T guy, you want to check something, they'll say, oh, how is that true? I'm like, well, here's the number of my supervisor. You can just call them and confirm. You'll have a fake card, and they call them, and just for the fact that they're actually calling someone else to verify this information, and that someone is also on your team, they'll say, oh yeah, he's one of my guys. He just needs to go in and take a quick look. So that can help you as a backup pretext. For the HI hiring, the interview tour, it is good also for fake aliases and profiles. You want to have a portfolio of a couple of fake aliases and profiles on LinkedIn. I'm sorry for you recruiters out there. But yeah, personally, I've had aliases for a couple of years now, and they've matured, and I get so many recruiters reaching out. It's ridiculous. But yeah, you do definitely want to have a couple of fake aliases and fake profiles created because you want those profiles to mature over time. You want to increase the friend request amount, and you might make it appear like it's a real person, you know? Ideally, when creating those, at least for the first name, try to keep the first name legit. You can change the last name, but the first name, keep it legit, just in case a recruiter sees you at an event and say, hey, I have you on LinkedIn. You're this profile. I'm like, yeah. Exactly. So yeah, you don't want a recruiter calling you on your BS of your fake profile. In terms of attire, it's really varies. If you're going into an urban environment, you want to keep it formal, but don't use flashy clothes. Try not to wear things that people could remember. For example, specific earrings or necklaces and hairdos or hairstyles. Try to keep it as in a way that you can blend in as much as you can. That way it's harder for someone to remember you. Especially with receptionists, they have a really keen eye for details and they're usually spotting on people and remember these kind of things. If you're going into a rural environment where it's a remote location, there's really no people around, you can actually go comfortable. You can wear your cargo pants or whatever. In places like that, I actually do recommend as well carrying different sets of gloves in case you need to jump over fences, in case you need to jump over fences and whatnot. So yeah, for rural, you actually want to go as comfortable as possible. So here are, for example, 3 different scenarios that you would use to social engineer your way in. For example, you have the AT&T tech guy, which we spoke a moment ago. You have the real estate agent. This is good because the real estate agents are usually allowed to go in everywhere. I mean, you dress up like a real estate agent, you can recognize them a mile away. You just claim that you would like to take, let's say you walk into a building. The building has multiple floors and your client is on the 4th or 5th floor, right? And you go to the receptionist very kindly, show up with a box of donuts. That really helps. It's like, hey, I'm a real estate agent. I'm trying to rent out an office that it's 3 floors up. Do you mind if I just take a quick tour and take a couple of pictures of the inside of the location so I can have an idea of what it looks like? And by doing that, you're actually taking pictures of the employees, of badges, of cameras, and how it looks in the inside. That way, actually, you can spot in what room the server is. In terms of the engagement, usually you don't do these engagements like do the reconnaissance on a single day and then the next day you actually break in. Ideally, you want to have a timeline. For example, on between the 1st and 3rd day, you do all your reconnaissance. You gather as much information as you can. The more information you have, the better. Take information on what the area looks like during the day versus at night. Go multiple times at night because sometimes you'll have a cleaning crew that goes once a week, but they go on a specific night. Same as for the day. Sometimes you'll have third-party suppliers that they go on site to do a delivery. Maybe they do only once a week and you can only spot them on that single day. So third, supply chain attacks is a good one that I actually like to use in engagements. For example, you do reconnaissance on who is one of their suppliers because most companies, they need suppliers of stuff. It's a known fact. So you do reconnaissance on who their supplier is, right? You find out information about the company, about the logo, try to create a uniform of that company and try then to infiltrate your target, pretending you're one of the supply people. So yeah, a lot of reconnaissance on the final days before the engagement. Prepare your gear and practice. Do a case scenario of what could happen if something goes wrong. If you're social engineering, you actually want to practice your rebuttals and your pretexts. For example, if you have a pretext that you're claiming to be the AT&T guy, have someone interact with you and ask you random questions about your pretext. That way you can actually practice your rebuttal in case someone actually really asks you about that question. Like, oh, you really say who you are? Okay, I need to validate that. So yeah, you want to practice. And then once you practice and you have all your gear ready, it's go time. It's breaking in. And we reach the end. So any questions? Oh, that's a lot of questions. Where?
So you said you need your authorization form just in case?
Yeah.
But what if you have a fake authorization form? Does that count as you getting caught, or does the red team still go?
So I wouldn't use a fake authorization form. I definitely wouldn't use that because the authorization form is usually the document that you're actually going to be presenting to your authorities, as in law enforcement authorities, and to them, do not present a fake authorization form. No way. It-
Go ahead. Can you speak to maybe a notable event, or I guess in your history of doing this, maybe something that you always reflect upon as like a successful experience, but almost didn't go that way?
Yes. In a social engineering engagement, we were trying to, this was in when I barely was starting getting my toes into social engineering. It was a supply chain. We copied the logo. So we were able to get into one of the offices. From there, we gather information on who was the MSP of that company. So we gather information on the logo, on the polo. We made fake polos of that MSP and then went to the other location where we couldn't physically get into. Once we were there, I was trying to social engineer my way in, but my teammate, he was a little bit nervous, had some shades on, and we got caught pretty much because the assistant, she kind of picked up that we were trying to social engineer in, and she actually contacted the CEO, not the CEO, the CTO of her office to validate that we were there supposed to be going in, and yeah, we get caught. So that's why I say social engineering, always practice your rebuttals. You always want to practice.
Thank
My question's on dumpster diving. Have you ever used dumpsters to collect information about things like that? No.
Thank God, no. Surprisingly, the places that would use a lot of paperwork that you would consider dumpster diving, they're very well on top of the whole shredding thing. They're usually, because of what helped them get into the shredding is the whole compliance stuff. So they're usually into shredding. So yeah, no dumpster diving. Thank God.
What's the weirdest security mechanism you come up against?
The weirdest?
Yes.
I'm sorry, the weirdest?
Weirdest
The weirdest what?
security mechanism you've come up against.
The weirdest security mechanism. I don't think I've really encountered any weird one. But weird way that I actually use to target a client, I would say probably when I used a Cantana to hack a client, their wireless assessment, because they were in a building and they were like on the 10th floor or something. It was going to be pretty much impossible to social engineer a way in. So I used a Cantana and I was like across like half a mile away and I was able to stop their Wi-Fi. Yeah, the Cantana. Like you use a Cantana or Yagi antenna and you'll get a long range out of them. When I mentioned the Cantana versus the Yagi, I mean, they do the same purpose, but the Cantana is a little bit smaller and a little bit more discreet depending on the size. You can actually hide it inside of a backpack, and it can go easily unnoticed. If you've seen the Yagi, they're huge. Yes, exactly.
What kinds of backgrounds do you usually see from people getting into physical red teaming?
Some of them, well, actually, quite a large of them have military background. In my case, I don't have any military background whatsoever. I just started off one day as a hobby. I got into lock picking. And then from there, I had a client reach out. It's like, hey, can you break it into these places? I'm like, I can give it a try. And then it just started snowballing from there.
What do you do in the instance where you're caught? Have you ever been able to get out of being caught?
It depends on who you get caught by. If it's employees or regular visitors, try to BS your way out of it. Try to BS your way out of it. If it's law enforcement, usually you want to come clean. But if it's anybody else, then by all means try to sneak your way out of it completely. That's why you always want to carry with you 2 IDs. So you want the fake one that you give in case you want to BS your way out of it, but then you have your real one in case law enforcement shows up.
In your line of work, what's the scariest situation you've ever found yourself in?
Tripping an alarm, which it can happen. Tripping an alarm, definitely. So far, no armed security guards. Before COVID, I was about to do an engagement into a bank in Puerto Rico. And I'm from Dominican Republic, so I know Puerto Rico as well as the Dominican Republic. Like, there's armed security guards, but so far no armed guards. Yes, just yet.
I don't need the microphone.
Go ahead.
So, let's say you've got the military experience, right?
Yeah.
But the technical side.
Yeah.
Is weak.
Correct.
Would you still hire somebody like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because for the technical aspects, like so ideally you want to be in a team, not just you solo. But like if you have a bad hacker in part of your team, once you're in, then you connect the plug in the USB malicious device or whatever, that's it. Get out of there. Because you got the hacker then to do everything else. So yeah, you don't necessarily need the technical element all out of it. And by all means, you do not. Social, it's common or so like if you want to move it into the social engineer as well, you do not need experience in the whole physical security as well as the technical. If you're able to get your things done by just social engineering and minding everybody, by all means, you can be a social engineer. Usually people with the psychology background, they can get easy into the social engineering aspect.
Hold on, the microphones are for the people on Zoom and streaming, so not for the people in the room. So I'll bring one over to you in a sec.
Are there negative implications for getting caught while like on an operation?
I'm sorry, can you repeat? If there, you can pull up.
If there's any negative implications, like if you're working for a red teaming company and you're on a social engineering operation, if you do get caught from the company that you work for, are there any like negative impacts that you experience?
If you do not do your procedures properly, your proper documentation, like for example, breaking into a law firm or a courthouse, you could get caught, and it can, like, you can have a lot of legal implications. Sorry to bring it up. There is the scenario, if you've heard about it, on the Darknet Diaries, the guys that got caught on the courthouse from coal fire. Yeah, it can happen. It's not that often, but it can happen. That's why you always want to have your proper documentation and everything clear as water.
But even if it is, law enforcement wants to be a dick, they will be. Jurisdiction.
Any other questions? All right, awesome. Thank you for coming.